Something very intriguing about a lot of these far-right groups or fraternal organizations is how they always claim to have some benefit, for British children. I mean, the recent trope they use is the Muslim rape gangs. Now, something that I think would be important to note is that, yes, I mean, grooming up north is very bad. I agree with it. It's absolutely disgusting. And, in general, there is a problem up there. However, it's quite funny when you consider that the majority of people who perpetrate the crime of child molestation, child abductions, sexual harassment, some of them even culminating in murder, as we've seen recently in cases like the one in Mitcham, is that the majority of the perpetrators of these crimes have been and are generally white middle-aged men. It seems Britain First is more concerned about the race of the people committing the crime than they are with the actual crime or the children suffering them. These are heinous and disgusting crimes, and nobody should defend them, absolutely. And I am all for patrolling and trying to help children and whatnot. But what I don't like is when these things are used as rhetoric to target people. What essentially Britain First are saying is, we don't mind people sexually harassing our children. We don't mind our kids being groomed. But the grooming has to be done by white, Christian, Englishmen, or agnostics. That would be fine too. It's funny because they've recently been going into mosques, kicking down doors, harassing the old people they find in the mosque. And they are a paramilitary organization, so they do time it to make sure that the mosques are empty. And they go in and they demand to speak to the imam at a time when the imam probably will not be in. And they speak about child grooming. And I think it's a bit weird that you'd want to go into a mosque looking for people who do that sort of thing, because the kind of men who would go to a nightclub and ply young girls with alcohol probably are not going to be in the mosque tomorrow. I think it's a bit strange, to be honest with you, because they should be going to the nightclubs where these girls are allowed in underage to drink and party. As we see it all the time. Loads of young girls get into nightclubs. Why aren't they patrolling and harassing the bouncers? Why aren't they patrolling the streets and taking alcohol away from underage kids? Because alcohol and drugs are the major problem. I'm yet to see any videos of them storming a Catholic church or a Catholic school where these things also do take place. And I'm not saying in general, no disrespect to the Catholic faith, but there is just as much, if not more, of a problem with pedophilia. With, in fact, at one point, the Vatican conspiring to hide the problem and cover it up and avoid meting out any punishments to the people that commit these crimes within the institution. Yet Muslims are being targeted for something that happens in a small minority of towns within the north of England. And these people really think they care about British children. I think it's an insult to anybody who has a child that has been groomed or molested, that these people take this just cause and use it as an excuse for them to carry out their campaigns of hatred. If you're really, really angry, then yes, show me how many Catholic churches have you raided? Why is it so race specific? Like it's okay, it's absolutely fine for white agnostic to molest a child, but when an Asian does it, that's when the real problem is. Well, are you upset that crime has been outsourced? Is that what your concern is right now? I mean, if we really want to boycott, if we really want to be angry, then why haven't they stormed the offices of the BBC, who seem to be prolific hirers of people who have been grooming children? Where was the outrage about Jimmy Tarbuck? Where was the outrage about Jimmy Savile? I mean, even now we have another highbrow person in court over child grooming. I have seen nothing. I am on the Britain First page every single day, and I haven't seen a single report. I haven't seen a single demonstration online from members of these groups. They only ever seem to be angry whenever it is an Asian that perpetrates the crime. Yes, we can blame media in part, but I think even, like for the past 4 weeks, I've been following the news, and almost every single act of child molestation that has come up in mainstream media, including tabloid newspapers, has been perpetrated by white, middle-aged men. And when I say almost, not because the rest were done by Asians, but because the rest involved women too. In fact, there have even been recent cases of women supplying children to child molesters. In these situations, all the people involved have been white English people. Now, I want to see what Britain First has to say about this. Even without tabloid newspapers, even without mainstream media, just a little Googling, a little bit of triangulation of research, contact any criminologist you know. I'm currently liaising with a criminologist in Croydon. You will find that records actually prove this. It's statistically proven that there is a much higher rate. The rate varies from 94 up to 97% of this particular crime being committed by white middle-aged men. So, if you really want to make it out to be a Muslim problem, even if you look at the rates of that crime being committed in the north of England, the rate only drops down by about 5%. So that's still about, 89 to about 94, 95% of that particular crime being carried out by people who look like members of Britain First. Another problem I have with members of groups like Britain First is how they seem to contradict their own rhetoric. So they say things like, we're not racist, we just want England to be for the English. That is indeed racist because, one, England has never been a homogeneously white nation. Even up until when England was part of the Roman Empire, there were at least 2 million people that you would class as black living here. Where did they go? The answer, my friends, is in your DNA. The average white English person living in England, should they take a DNA test, will have Middle Eastern and North African, even some West African blood in them. Why? Because this country has always been cosmopolitan. Your literature can prove it. All the crests of royal families that have Moorish heads on their emblems can prove it. And furthermore, even the culture and the food, the things that you enjoy every day in England, the influences of foreigners, as you would call them, is very, very obvious. People like Britain First, the EDL and their likes cannot rationalize the fact that Islam and Christianity come from the exact same parts of the world. And it is very possible to be Muslim and British. It is very possible to be Muslim and white English. There is a white mosque in Norwich. It's predominantly white. All white English people. They have, and for centuries, it's not a new phenomenon. For centuries, there have been white Muslims. For centuries, there have been British Muslims. Islam is as much a part of England now as Christianity is. And if Islam is foreign, then so is Christianity. If indeed you want to take England back to its original religious roots, then you should abandon Abrahamian religion altogether and, practice paganism. Even the former Archbishop of Canterbury has stated, amongst several historians and sociologists, England is no longer a Christian country. England is in fact a post-Christian country. And the laws, although deeply influenced by what used to be religion, are ever changing to secular. So if anything, England is a secular country, which means that Islam and Christianity are in the same standing. And the fact is this: Christianity and Islam began in the Middle East. So if you fail to see that somehow it's racist to say that Muslims are not English, Christians are not English either. The religion came in through very much the same means. I'd go further to state that people like, for example, St. George, born in the exact same place Jesus was born, Palestine. The fact is, if St. George rose from the dead today and walked the streets, and if Isa or Yeshua or Jesus or whatever name you want to call him walk down the streets today, you and members of your group would probably harass him because you think he's Muslim, because he was a Middle Eastern man. Not the picture of Caesar Borgia that they put up on their group. No, these people were Middle Eastern. They didn't speak English. They were not European. So, you really need to get your facts straight. Islam as a religion, I'm not trying to preach to anyone, but Islam as a religion, in theory, does not contradict any British values. In fact, the values that you show members of these right-wing groups who tend to be football hooligans, alcoholics, thugs, you're not British. Muslims are just as British as Victorian British people. Islam has the same values as old English culture: respect for elders, fair play, manners, modesty. Many of the things that we associate with Islam are things that English people have been doing themselves for centuries. So why is it that the moment it comes from another place, it's a problem for you? Moving on from the child molestation and all that stuff, there are a few other things I think members of Britain First really do need to consider. Firstly, it is racist to automatically state that people who are Muslim are not British, because you're stereotyping. You're being you're being exclusive and discriminatory. And also there's the fact that one can be British and Muslim. Now, Muslim and Asian, Muslim and Arab are used interchangeably. Through intersectionality, we know that very much this is a racist attitude. The fact that Muslims are treated foreign simply because they have a different faith. Most Muslims in this country are not English, as in white, but they are indeed British because they were born here, and by British law, they are just as British as you are. For you to state that they should go back to their countries for exercising their right to protest against laws in this country, which everyone else has the right to do, is very much racist. The Muslim faith does not go against British culture, as it espouses many aspects of British culture that have been long forgotten by the likes of people who join groups like Britain First. Fair play, modesty, respect for elders are all things that any true, cultured, and classy English person would appreciate. So to point at the worst aspects or the worst people within these faiths and use them to paint the rest of the faith is unfair, because, you know, by your own logic, the English are a culture of pedophilic people and a culture of alcoholics and a culture of so many other things that I could list. But we know for a fact that these people do not make up the majority. So let's be fair on both sides. But yes, you can be Muslim and British. Christianity and Islam come from the exact same part of the world, the Middle East. In fact, the man whose cross you use almost as the insignia of racism now in England, which is very sad because people can't even be patriotic anymore and wave flags without being labeled racist because of a small minority. St. George was born in Palestine, as was Jesus, Yeshua, Isa, or whatever name anyone else wants to call him. Now, it's funny because the people who walk around carrying the cross and using it as an excuse to raid mosques would probably attack Jesus and St. George if they walked down the streets today, because neither of them were white, no matter what Eurocentric artists draw them as. These men were Middle Eastern. Think about that. If you really want to take England back to its original religious roots, then you should practice paganism, because England was never always Christian. You know, England was a pagan nation. You should practice your Celtic religions and the animistic religions. You should go back to being Druids. England is not a Christian country. It is a post-Christian country. And furthermore, if you really want to go to the essential spiritual roots of England, then you should practice Druidism or paganism, because those are the essentially original white religions. Christianity and Islam come from the exact same parts of the world, the Middle East. And in fact, if you do your research, you'll find that St. George, the patron saint of the racists in England, unfortunately, and Jesus, or Yeshua, or Isa, as he's known by many names, were in fact born in Palestine. Which means that if they existed today, the very same people who use the cross and their symbols as excuses for their racism would probably attack them and have them deported. Think about that. You contradict yourself when you say that you're only against Islamic extremists. When you go into mosques, you don't seem to know the difference, because I've never seen you attacking extremists. You go into mosques and attack and intimidate old men. That is a huge contradiction. Going into a mosque will offend even the most moderate of Muslims. So I don't see where you get off saying that you don't have a problem with all Muslims. When you walk down the streets and you insult the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, you are insulting all Muslims, not just terrorists, not just extremists. You're insulting all Muslims. And I don't think you seem to understand the fact. You also go around saying that mosques should be burnt down, mosques shouldn't be built. That affects all Muslims. In fact, it seems from the bulk of things that you say, the majority of Muslims that you talk about don't even attend mosques. So yes, you are contradicting yourself. You hate all Muslims. Be honest about it. Stop dilly-dallying. Muslims have been a part of British culture for centuries. Queen Victoria, in fact, had a crush on a Muslim male servant. You mad, bro? In fact, Muslims fought alongside Sikhs and Hindus in world wars, and I very rarely see you guys state that. When you talk about how your ancestors who fought to defend England and Queen and country from the far right, you fail to mention that those ancestors fought alongside Singhs, Patels, and Khans. Why is that? And don't you see any irony in the fact that you use the same rhetoric and the same style of propaganda that Nazis and brown shirts used before you? You don't? Well, think about that too. Some of my ancestors fought in the World War. I think I have a right to live wherever I want, and I have a right to practice whatever religion I want, because my ancestors fought for that and helped your ancestors win their wars, despite the fact that they never get shown in the films, and we get very, very little credit for what we did. You claim that Islam is a misogynistic religion, yet very little is done about the misogyny that comes from the English. Nobody protests about the misogynistic images that we see on television. Nobody protests about the fact that women in this country still earn less money than men. I don't see any protesting from Britain First about the way in which All manner of products are advertised, from cars to alcohol to television programming. It seems that nothing sells unless it has a young naked woman in it. Even the news can't sell without a woman baring her chest on the third page. You don't see this as sexist, but somehow women who choose to cover themselves are a symbol of sexism. And then to top it off, so many members of the EDL and the BNP have attacked Muslim women, beaten them up, spat at them, including friends of mine. And they do this, and then they say that they are against the maltreatment of women. So let me get this straight. You beat women up because you think that their husbands beat them up. Yeah, it makes sense. It really does. Essentially, if you're against grooming and you're against the sexual maltreatment of women, then you should boycott television altogether. And you should stop your children from watching programs like the Kardashians and all the stuff that they show. You should not let your children watch any of the American programming coming in, like Vampire Diaries, which girls who are barely out of their teens are in relationships with beings that are over 100 years old. That is kind of creepy. That is pedophilia. That is grooming, because in a lot of these programs, the girls meet these guys before they turn that certain age. Right? Look up Vampire Diaries. The main star, the protagonist, who is a girl, actually encounters a man that will later become her lover just before she turns 17. But you don't mind your kids watching that. You don't mind your kids watching programs like Glee that sexualize teens either. And, in conclusion, I could actually sit down here all day and point out reasons why people like the EDL, Britain First, and the National Front are indeed the spawn of Satan. But I'm sure even they know that what they do is wrong. Half of these guys probably don't believe the rhetoric that they spew. Well, the leaders don't, but the followers do. I think I might have to do a video about that.